The story begins on that cold, quiet night of April 11th, 1952, which left an indelible mark on aviation history. Isla Grande Airport in San Juan, Puerto Rico, bustled even at midnight. At that time, the civil aviation industry was booming after World War II, and American World Airways, or Pan Am, was considered the world's safest, most prestigious, and most modern airline. Pan Am aircraft were considered not just a means of transport, but a symbol of luxury and reliability. Parked on the airport apron that night was a Douglas DC-4 aircraft, which, in keeping with Pan Am tradition, had been given a distinctive name, the Clipper Endeavour. It was a large, sturdy, four-engine, propeller-driven passenger aircraft used worldwide for long-distance transcontinental flights. The aircraft, bearing registration number N88920, was scheduled to fly to New York City's Idlewild Airport, now known as John F. Kennedy International Airport. A total of 69 people were aboard the Clipper Endeavour that night, 64 passengers and 5 crew members. The passengers were quite diverse. Some were Puerto Rican immigrants who had settled in the United States and were returning to work after visiting their families over the holidays. Some were businessmen on business trips, and some were families with their children, traveling from San Juan to New York in hopes of a better future. The atmosphere inside the cabin was mixed. Some were preparing to sleep, exhausted from the long flight, while others, sitting in their seats, laughed and talked, making plans for their arrival in New York. At that time, air travel wasn't bound by the strict security regulations we have today. Everyone was lost in their own world, and no one had the slightest idea that within minutes, the most terrifying night of their lives was about to begin. In command of the plane in the cockpit was Captain John C. Burns. Captain Burns was no ordinary pilot. He was one of Pan Am's most experienced and respected pilots, with thousands of hours of flying experience. He was accompanied in the cockpit by First Officer Richard Holloway, a skilled and experienced aviator. Flight engineer Harold McIntosh was also on duty to monitor the aircraft's technical condition and fuel balance. The cabin was managed by 2 young and enthusiastic flight attendants, Patricia George and Lydia Gutierrez. The entire crew was skilled at their jobs and had years of experience handling a massive aircraft like the Douglas DC-4. According to the Weather Service, the skies on the route from San Juan to New York were completely clear, the winds were calm, and no major storms or inclement weather had been forecast. Everything was going according to plan. At 12:11 a.m. local time, Captain John C. Byrne requested final permission for takeoff from San Juan Air Traffic Control. With the green light from the control tower, the Clipper Endeavour began to roll onto the runway, the roar of 4 massive piston engines. The heavy wheels of the Douglas DC-4 left the ground in San Juan, and the plane slowly ascended into the dark Caribbean night sky. Below the windows, the twinkling lights of the city of San Juan grew smaller, leaving only the vast, black, and bottomless Atlantic Ocean stretching ahead. The plane turned from southwest to north and began its assigned altitude of 8,000 feet. The first few minutes of takeoff were uneventful. The seatbelt lights in the cabin were turned off, and many passengers closed their eyes. But just 9 minutes after takeoff, when the plane was approximately 550 feet above sea level and only a few miles from the coastline, an instrument panel prong in the cockpit suddenly began to spin frantically. Suddenly, a loud, unusual, and terrifying rumble shook the entire plane. Engine number 3, located on the right wing, had begun an overspeeding runaway. That is, the engine's propeller was spinning out of control at extremely high speeds. Overspeeding was considered an extremely dangerous condition in the era of piston engines, as it caused the propeller to accelerate so fast that instead of cutting through the air, it itself created a significant drag, completely disrupting the plane's balance. Captain John C. Burns and flight engineer Harold McIntosh immediately understood the gravity of the situation. The extremely high speed of engine number 3 caused severe vibrations throughout the plane, making it feel as if the plane would break into pieces mid-air. Captain Burns immediately instructed the co-pilot to feather the propeller of engine number 3. Feathering is a process in which the angle of the propeller blades is turned parallel to the wind so that they stop rotating and minimize air friction. This is the first and most essential step in stabilizing the plane during any engine failure. But luck was not on the Clipper Endeavor's side that night. The flight engineer pulled the feathering lever with all his might, but due to a mechanical failure, the propeller of engine number 3 refused to feather. It went out of control and reached its maximum speed. The loss of engine number 3 and the failure of the propeller to feather, the tension within the cockpit reached its peak. The plane was steadily losing speed, and air friction had increased so much that the entire body of the Douglas DC-4 began to tremble. Captain John C. Burns immediately radioed the San Juan Air Traffic Control Tower, announcing in clear terms that one of the plane's engines had completely failed, that control was becoming difficult, and that instead of continuing the flight, they were immediately making an emergency U-turn to return to San Juan Airport. The control tower, recognizing the gravity of the situation, cleared all runways at San Juan and alerted emergency firefighters and ambulances. Captain Burns cautiously began to turn the plane back towards San Juan. The night darkness was so intense that it was difficult to distinguish between the sea and the sky outside the window. As the plane was still turning, another devastating accident occurred. Just minutes after takeoff, the second engine on the right wing, engine number 4, also suddenly failed. One after another, both piston engines on the right wing completely failed. The situation had become not only critical, but downright life-threatening. In a 4-engine aircraft, if both engines on one side completely stop, and the propeller of one of them is spinning uncontrollably in the air, maintaining the plane in the air defies the laws of physics. The right wing had no thrust left, while both engines on the left wing, engine numbers 1 and 2, were still operating at full power. This disparity in power caused the plane to tilt sharply to the right and rapidly descend. Captain Burns and co-pilot Holloway used all their strength to pull the control yoke to the left and press the rudder pedals to keep the plane upright. Flight engineer McIntosh repeatedly pressed the emergency switch on the engine control panel. But engine number 4 didn't return to life. The San Juan runway was still a few miles away, but the plane had reached a mere 300 feet above sea level. With 2 stalled engines and heavy drag at such a low altitude, reaching the runway had become completely impossible. Captain Burns faced the toughest decision of his life. If he continued to pull the plane to the runway, it would lose lift and stall directly into the sea on one wing, breaking into pieces upon impact. He had only one option left: to make an emergency water landing, known in aviation parlance as ditching, over the dark, turbulent waters of the Atlantic Ocean. Captain Burns alerted the crew over the intercom and signaled an emergency water landing in the cabin. Flight attendants Patricia George and Lydia Gutierrez instructed passengers to fasten their seatbelts and brace for impact. The cabin was suddenly filled with screams and panic. Several passengers experienced panic attacks, while others began reciting prayers in their own languages. Unfortunately, in those days, passengers were not given any safety demonstrations before flight on how to put on life jackets or use emergency exits. Passengers were also unaware of where the life jackets were located under their seats or how to inflate them. At approximately 12:20 a.m., Captain John C. Byrne, demonstrating extreme skill, raised the nose of the Douglas DC-4 slightly so that the tail of the aircraft, not the nose, touched the water first. This was a highly risky maneuver, as it was nearly impossible to judge the water's surface and the wave heights in the darkness of night. The surging waves of the Atlantic Ocean awaited like a solid concrete wall. As the Clipper Endeavor's underside hit the icy, salty waters of the Atlantic Ocean, there was a terrifying, deafening explosion. The impact was so powerful that the tail section of the plane was instantly severed from the fuselage. The impact was so intense that several seats inside the cabin were ripped from their positions, and passengers were thrown on top of each other. The immense pressure of the water shattered the windows and doors in the main cabin, and the stormy sea began to rush inside the plane at a frightening speed. The cabin was plunged into complete darkness. Water, debris, and the agonized cries of people were everywhere. Passengers who had survived the initial impact were now struggling to save their lives in the rapidly rising water. The Douglas DC-4's fuselage was severely damaged, and it was unable to remain afloat. Within 3 minutes of landing, the Clipper Endeavour nose-flicked into the air and sank 2,000 feet into the Atlantic Ocean, dragging with it many passengers who couldn't escape through the broken doors in time. As the Clipper Endeavour disappeared amid the raging waves of the Atlantic Ocean, all that remained was darkness, burning fuel, and the screams of people floating in the water. San Juan Air Traffic Control immediately declared an emergency as soon as it lost radio signal. The U.S. Coast Guard, U.S. Navy, and nearby merchant ships were dispatched to the crash site. The darkness of night and high waves posed a significant challenge for rescuers. When Coast Guard patrol vessels and aircraft arrived on the scene, they found only a few life rafts, the plane's wreckage, and passengers struggling for breath in the water. The panic and language barrier among the passengers at the time of the crash was so severe that many failed to put on their life jackets properly, or inflated them inside the cabin, preventing them from exiting the plane. At the end of this harrowing rescue operation, which lasted hours, only 17 people were rescued alive, including Captain John C. Burns, the co-pilot, and several crew members. The remaining 52 passengers perished in the horrific accident. Most of the bodies of those who lost their lives were never recovered. They sank into the depths of the Atlantic, along with the main wreckage of the plane. Immediately after the accident, the U.S. Civil Aeronautics Board launched a detailed investigation into this horrific accident. The biggest question facing investigators was how 2 engines failed within such a short time of takeoff, leading to such a large number of fatalities. The report, released after months of technical investigation, revealed several shocking revelations. 1. Mechanical failure. The failure of the feathering mechanism of engine number 3's propeller created excessive drag, which put additional strain on the second engine and caused it to fail. 2. Lack of safety practices. The most significant revelation was the cause of passenger deaths. The board found that if passengers had been properly informed about wearing life jackets, using emergency exits, and ditching procedures before takeoff, the death toll could have been significantly lower. The Pan Am Flight 526A accident marked a major turning point in the history of civil aviation. Following this Good Friday tragedy, international aviation authorities implemented historic changes to safety regulations that we see on every flight even today. Pre-flight safety demonstration. Every commercial flight worldwide mandated that passengers wear life jackets, use oxygen masks, and be informed of emergency exits before takeoff. Safety instruction cards. A multilingual and pictorial safety instruction card was legally required to be placed in a pocket in front of every seat. Easy access to life jackets. Life jackets under the seats were designed and placed in such a way that any passenger could remove them within seconds, even in a panic situation. Although regulations changed the aviation sector forever, the question of where the wreckage of the Clipper Endeavour, which sank in the Atlantic Ocean that night, remained an unsolved mystery for more than 7 decades. Strong ocean currents, immense depths, and the limited technology of the time prevented any trace of the Douglas DC-4 from being found. Finally, the time came to unravel this mystery. Expert teams from the Air Sea Heritage Foundation, Deep Sea Vision, and the Discovery Channel launched a historic search operation using modern technology. Using 3D ocean mapping, cutting-edge sonar technology, and AUV, autonomous underwater vehicle submarines, they began scanning the Atlantic floor about 5 miles off the coast of Puerto Rico and at a depth of 2,000 feet, about 600 meters. During the expedition, sonar mapped an unusual metal structure on the murky, dark ocean floor. When the remotely operated vehicle's ROV cameras were sent down, the main body of a Douglas DC-4, broken in two, was clearly visible amidst the silt of the Atlantic depths. High-definition photos and videos showed the aircraft's cockpit, Pan Am's iconic blue globe logo on the wings and tail, and the name Clipper Endeavour clearly visible even after 74 years. This historic discovery not only solved the biggest aviation mystery of 1952 once and for all, but also provided a final piece to the 52 innocent passengers and their families who lost their lives on that horrific night.